Okay. Part 6, I think. Riarda's wrath. 2 days had passed since Anastasia summoned me. He had said that Eglantine would probably invite me to a tea party, but she hadn't yet approached me. I couldn't imagine it was getting to happen anytime soon. Things were probably on hold until she finished her classes and socializing season began. I spent my time leisurely visiting the library where I would top off Schwartz and Weiss's with Mana and continued working toward my goal of reading every single book available. Brunhilde, Feline, Judith, Lenore, and Cornelius were accompanying me there today. After seeing how terribly uncoordinated the Ehrenfest apprentice knights were doing during our game of treasure-stealing dinner, Lenore and Cornelius had rethought their plans and were now discussing the most efficient method for defeating Fabies. Fighting the Dunkelfelder Knights directly, rather than indirectly through speed dinner, had apparently shown them just how big of a difference there was between our duchies. As a second year who hadn't yet started taking night courses, Judith struggled to keep up with strategy-related discussions, and it was for this reason that she had merely been assigned to guard me in the near-empty library. Lenore and Cornelius, meanwhile, spoke privately and transcribed books in a nearby corral. It was almost as though they were on a date of sorts, so I couldn't help but silently cheer on Lenore as I read through my books. Feline was sitting in a carrel right next to mine, desperately transcribing as quickly and accurately as she could manage. Before I knew it, the light signaling that the library was almost about to close shone, dyeing the pages of my book a rainbow of colors. "It's time to go," Brunhilde informed me and shut the book in my hands. I sighed. "Milady, their day's over. Borrow books, milady." "Yes, I know, Brunhilde. I wish to borrow these books. Please go through the necessary steps with Schwartz. Weiss, here are the keys to the corrals." A life I had secured since finishing all of my classes was completely heaven. And every day was bliss. I could read in the library all the way till closing time and then borrow anything I wanted to continue reading in the dormitory. "Lady Rosamund, I finished transcribing all the books about Fabies today," Lenore said on our way back to the dormitory. She then went on to say they had discovered some unexpected weaknesses of certain Fabies, speaking with a bright smile on her face. Cornelius nodded. With this information in mind, I planned to carefully read the reference books Eckert lent me about coordination in battle. I would also like to return to Ehrenfest briefly to see the commander so that I can ask how the Knight's Order works together when hunting especially strong Fabies. "Students can return to their home duchy after finishing their classes, correct?" I asked. "I wish you luck with completing all yours soon." Cardsdale was incredibly busy at this time of year, having to deal with the Lord of Winter and guard Sylvester during his socializing as an ob, but winter socializing still meant every noble in Ehrenfest was gathered in one place. Talking to the knight of previous generations who had played treasure-stealing dinner would be plenty productive. Or maybe drill instructors who were used to having beating coordination into apprentices. Lenore repeatedly nodded as she listened to my thoughts. I always wondered what purpose winter written classes served, if any, but I would never have thought they were so directly connected to proper coordination, she said. "I imagine that is the days where everyone played treasure-stealing dinner. Students would more fervently beat strategies into their heads and work together to come up with ways to trick their enemies." Cornelius had told me before that speed dinner didn't involve much coordination or strategizing because of the nature of the game. Victory could be secured simply by having everyone charge the Fabies and beat its head in, as he was having a grand time thinking of plans. It seemed that Lenore shared this enthusiasm. There was a big smile on her face as she laughed and shared glances with him. Yes, bonding like this is what I want to see." I grinned at Cornelius and Lenore, which Brunhilde quickly noticed. "Are you providing Lenore your support, Lady Rosamund?" she asked in a subtle whisper. "Oh no, I'm not getting involved. It seems Cornelius is quite popular with the ladies, and it would not do for me to cause an unnecessary stir." Since I was both an Archduke candidate and Cornelius' sister, openly supporting Lenore would more or less lock her into place as his future wife. It wasn't something to be done so carelessly. I hadn't spoken with my family about which of my brothers they planned for Angelica to potentially marry, nor was I aware how Cornelius felt about all this. "I see, that is a relief. Nothing would tear retainers apart faster than favoritism," Brunhilde replied with a small smile. She made a good point. I had admittedly been planning to support Lenore after talking things over with my family, and maybe it was wiser for me to do nothing instead. Yeah, probably a good idea. "Oh, here we go." When we entered the Ehrenfest dormitory, Riarda was shouting so furiously that her voice was clearly audible from the entranceway. That's enough out of you, Traga, came a roar from above, indicating that she was lecturing him in his room. Brunhilde and I exchanged glances. Neither of us had even ever heard Riarda shouting this loudly before. Not even back at the castle, I bet. What in the world did Traga do? I'm afraid I do not know. Do you guys not remember what happened during the freaking treasure-stealing dinner? He disobeyed what she was trying to tell him and could have ended up getting her hurt. Who knows? So yeah, of course that's probably what she's mad about. Well, it seems like the most likely explanation anyway. Brunhilde replied, shall we first go to your room and get you changed for supper? We can ask Hartmut whether he knows anything later. It was better if she avoided going to the second floor where the boys stayed, so this was for the best. Hartmut had attended classes this afternoon, but those had ended before the library closed, so he probably knew at least something. Very well. In the meantime, Cornelius, could you go investigate and inform Riarda that we are back? You wish for me to interrupt when she is shouting that sharply, Lady Rosamund? He asked with a grimace, pointing up at the ceiling. We could no longer make out Riarda's exact words, but it was clear that her lecture was ongoing, and no less fierce. It would take a great deal of courage to walk straight into the library, the lion's den. You do not need to enter abruptly, but surely you can knock and inform them it is time for supper, I suppose. For Angelica, who was completely exhausted from her afternoon classes, presented me with the letter. It was an invitation to a tea party from Eglantine, which Angelica had received during her written classes from one of the Klassenberg candidates. Apprentice attendance. I thank you ever so much, Angelica. Brunhilde, may I ask you to compose a reply? Certainly. What shall I bring her as a gift? Brunhilde asked. She started to rack her brain while Cornelius thought about who could serve as her guard knights. Lady Rosamund, I want to join you as a guard, Angelica said. As she had not yet finished her written classes, however, she was not included among the candidates. I would very much like that, Angelica. That is why I pray that you demonstrate so much excellence in your written classes that you did during our game of treasure-stealing dinner, I replied. Angelica's shoulders sank, eliciting a chuckle from Cornelius. She has already passed a third of her written classes, which speaks volumes to how hard she is trying. As expected, your presence here is having an enormous impact, he said. It seemed that Angelica was working a lot harder than she had during the 2 years I was asleep. In fact, she was trying so much harder that everyone in the Knight's Course was notably relieved. I can only imagine how much Father and Mother would rejoice if they heard Angelica, of all people, has already made this much progress, Lysletta said with a tearful smile. We will never be able to repay this debt to you, Lady Rosamund. Angelica was certainly doing better, but she was still a long way away from passing her remaining classes. Vigilance was key. Perhaps preparing a reward for her was wise. Angelica, how would you feel about me offering to teach you an additional step to my mana compression method if you finish all your written classes before I must return to Ehrenfest for the dedication ritual? There's another step? Both Angelica and Cornelius widened their eyes in surprise. I succeeded in developing a fourth step during my mana compression class. Say what? So there are more than 3 now? You didn't tell me anything about this, Wolfried complained. Surprised murmurs were already spreading throughout the dining hall. Ugh, why do my parents have to be from another faction? One student grumbled. When will I get to pick which faction I want to be in? I wonder that myself. Are they automatically enrolled in their parents' faction and they don't get a say, or do they actually get a say? This reaction made it blatantly clear how simply being from a different faction could put one at a massive disadvantage, and several apprentice knights started cradling their heads as they realized that an even bigger gap would soon be opening up between them and the others. These concerns were understandable, considering how those with rapidly growing mana capacities were already leaving them far behind. It is only natural that children who have not yet come of age are considered to belong to the same faction as their parents, and with the Veronica faction having been the main political power just a few years ago, our current situation was always inevitable. It is pointless to bemoan past decisions, but with that said, I shall do what I can to assist those who wish to change factions. Is that true, Lady Rosamund? The children of the former Veronica faction looked up at me with wide eyes. I did my best to return a very saintly smile. This is a big chance to get this generation's children under my wing. Good idea. We use contract magic when teaching the mana compression method, but I will consult Ob Ehrenfest about potentially teaching all those who wish to know, even if this means altering the contents of said magic contract. I can make no immediate promises, but I shall do everything in my power to make this happen, so please continue your efforts without fail. Understood. The faces of the former Veronica faction children lit up at this new goal of work toward. I was exceptionally concerned about that satisfied smile I saw Hartman giving me out of the corner of my eye, but no matter. Wilfred, this is the year you must prove yourself. Stay cautious and ensure that the competency you have shown so far extends to your socializing as well, I said. Right, he replied. I won't make the same mistakes again. Lord Wilfred and the rest of us are working harder by the day. You will surely approve of our efforts, one of his retainers assured me. They were all nodding to each other, bound together stronger than ever before. Meanwhile, Angelica was clapping her hands together in front of her chest while gazing at me with puppy-dog eyes. I can do it, Lady Rosamund. I just need a chance. The sudden change from how devastated she had seemed just a second ago was dramatic. Her blue eyes now shone with enthusiasm while her cheeks were flushed with excitement. Had she not elaborated that she wanted Mormana to improve her enhancements and make Sten look stronger, she could have easily been mistaken for a girl deeply in love. Now that I thought about it, obtaining Stenlook was the very reason Angelica had fought against her fear of studying in the first place, and she had also dedicated Mana to him on a regular basis. One could say she was already a girl deeply in love, with her Mana Blade. Oh, dear Lord. Oh, sweet, sweet Angelica, such a waste of good looks. Lady Rosamund, if you're going to teach Angelica the next step, should you not teach your own brother also? Cornelius asked, his dissatisfaction clear on his face. I chuckled. I will only teach her if she finished her classes before I return for the dedication ritual. It will most likely be impossible for her. While I was using this to motivate Angelica, I was due to return to Ehrenfest in less than 3 weeks. It was quite the unreasonable task as far as I was concerned, since she was not only managed to complete a third of her classes in the 3 weeks prior to this point, but Cornelius shook his head. Look at that expression. Do you really expect her not to succeed when she has the same sparkle in her eyes as you did when the library was on the line, he said, looking between Angelica and me. The two of you are exactly alike when it comes to charging blindly ahead to accomplish your goals. It seemed that Cornelius was already convinced Angelica would succeed no matter what. Okay, I will teach all of my retainers the 4th step, but only if Angelica passes. And we successfully raise our duchy's ranking to 12th or higher during the interduchy tournament. All right, Traugott said, clenching his fist with a wide smile. Hartmut, meanwhile, raised his eyebrows. If you're going to say all your retainers rather than just your guard knights, then as an apprentice scholar, I will need to work with the apprentice knights to the best of my ability. Cornelius, come to my room later. I have compiled a list of the most common Faebeasts used in past interduchy tournaments, as well as to how to defeat them. It is not exhaustive, but it should prove helpful. You have my thanks, Hartmut. Brunhilde gave an agreeing nod, a sharp glint in her eyes. We apprentice scholars will also need to put our heads together in preparation for the interduchy tournament. I am quite looking forward to the next one. With that, dinner came to an end. Milady, may I borrow a moment of your time? Riarda asked with an expression that conveyed no emotion whatsoever. There is something important I must discuss with you. Uh-oh. I've got a feeling we're going to find out what's going on. With how intensely Riarda had been shouting at Traugott earlier, I had assumed she would be prickly as heck to him at dinner, but she had remained calm the entire time. She truly was a master of controlling her emotions, which was exactly why I nodded without feeling all that doubtful. Of course, will my room do? I would like for all of your retainers to hear what I have to say, milady. For that reason, I have secured a room on the 1st floor. I glanced around at everyone sitting at my table. They all nodded except for Traugott, who was frozen in place with wide eyes. Uh-oh. You gonna get it. Whatever it is, you gonna get your dirty laundry aired. Right in front of everybody in your lap. Yeah, your master. Yep. Whatever's going on, we're going to hear about it. Grandmother, he began. Shall we go? Riarda interrupted, staring Traugott down with an expression that left no room for debate before leading the way. The tension that hung in the air between the two of them was palpable. Uh-oh. Hartman was walking slightly ahead of me. I reached out and gently tugged on his cape to get his attention. Do you know what's going on? I whispered. Of course I do. Riarda has been furious for 3 days now, he replied with a thin smile. I could sense anger coming from him as well, and judging by where it seemed to be directed, he seemed to be on Riarda's side. What in the world did Traugott do? Like I just told you before when you first asked that question, that's more than likely what it is. He was so incompetent that I'm assuming he's going to essentially... We're going to probably find out why, essentially. And to be completely honest, you guys... I already know why. I already know the reason. And yeah, she wasn't a very good judge of character on picking her retainers. That's all I can say. We arrived at a small meeting room, a short way away from the common room, there for students to speak more privately without having to venture up to the gender-separated floors. Some rooms were normally assigned to a particular faction, but as almost everyone was just using the common room this year, such restrictions hadn't been applied. Upon entering the room, I sat on the chair offered to me by Riarda. Laisletta and Brunhilde stood on either side of me with my guard knights standing next to them. Hartman as a scholar sat down with ink and a wooden board to do something with Feline, who was taking the seat beside him. I wasn't really sure what. Maybe they were going to record the conversation? Maybe? I don't know. Traugott had not been allowed to stand with my guard knights. Riarda had dragged him here by the arm, and she hadn't let go even now that we had arrived. She looked across my retainers with the utmost severity before opening her mouth to speak. Oh, here we go. Lady Rosemine, please release Traugott from his duties as your retainer. What? I cried out in unison with my two nearby attendants. In contrast, my guard knights merely responded with grimaces. I could guess they had more or less expected this, since none of them seemed at all surprised. Hartman, who had definitely known what was going on, did not even blink. As for Traugott, the blood drained from his face, and his expression became one of abject despair. He looked as though he had never expected such a request to be made by his own grandmother, which was completely understandable. It was an immense dishonor for a noble taken on as a retainer to be released from duty, so much so that it brought shame to one's entire house. It was hard to imagine Riarda wishing such disgrace upon her own grandson. Riarda, what in the world happened? Nothing that you were unaware of. You were present for the incident that spurred my wrath, and it should be obvious why I am stating this. Please do pay more attention to your surroundings and observe the behavior of your retainers with more critical eye, she replied sharply. Yes, of course. I'll be more careful from now on, I exclaimed, sitting up straight in an instant. A momentary brush with her anger had been enough to shake me to my very core. Traugott is not fit to be your retainer, my lady. I suggest you relieve him of duty at once, Riarda repeated, going on to explain that his words and actions during our treasure-stealing dinner match had completely disqualified him from the role. I knew it! That's what I knew it! That's it! I certainly hadn't considered it appropriate behavior, but she had evidently deemed it unthinkable and unforgivable. But he is your grandson, is he not? I asked. You recommended him yourself. Relieving him of duty is simply too harsh. I did indeed recommend him, since Traugott wished for the position, and Lord Benefacius had asked me to include more arch-nobles among your guard knights. I do love him as a grandmother, but I am your head attendant first and foremost. And you do not need a retainer who will act against you. And he did. He did act against you. He didn't listen to you, and even questioned your orders. This could have gotten you hurt, essentially, during that treasure-stealing dinner, if the Dunkelfelder knights had gotten to you. It seemed that it was precisely because Riarda loved Traugott as a grandmother that she had scolded him so harshly and told him to quit on his own terms. It was marginally better for him to willingly resign than me to label him as a failure and fire him myself. So essentially it's better to quit than be fired. Okay. Every retainer has his or her own motivations for serving the one they have chosen to serve, milady. It is for this reason I did not protest with Traugott wanting to serve you, but specifically to learn your manic compression method. Wait, what? Oh yeah, duh. She actually knew about this. Okay. What mattered was his attitude toward his work. Brunhilde had said she wished to serve me because she wanted to play a role in the introduction of new trends. Laisletta had resolved to serve me to repay her gratitude for my saving her older sister Angelica from failing her exams and dishonoring their entire house. Hartman wanted to accelerate the growth of my saint legend, while Feline was interested in gathering stories with me. Riarda and Angelica were serving me as per an order, and while Cornelius already came from a family that universally served as guards for the archducal family, he had, to my knowledge, personally requested to guard me as my older brother. In short, everyone had a reason for becoming one of my retainers, and it wasn't important what that reason was. Riarda had concluded that the only thing that mattered was whether a retainer did their job well, and prioritized the needs of the one they served over their own desires. However, Traugott does not have it in him to properly serve another. His attitude makes him entirely unsuited to become a servant. As your head attendant, I cannot allow such a disloyal individual to be recognized as your retainer. It seemed that Traugott held genuine disdain for me. My poor health and weak body had earned me his scorn, which, according to Riarda, was only made worse by the fact we were supposed to be cousins through Cardstad. Wow. Oh yeah, duh. It is an embarrassment, especially when Cornelius, despite being your brother, has been so perfect at distinguishing between public and private appropriate behavior, she declared. Riarda had apparently spent the past 3 days demanding that Traugott quit on his own terms before his complete lack of obedience and reluctance to serve caused yet more problems. He had made no such move despite this, and so Riarda had yelled at him again today. That explained the shouts we had heard upon entering the dorm. Incidentally, despite being told to quit just moments before dinner, he had tried ingratiating himself with me the moment he heard there was a fourth step to my mana compression process. That had infuriated Riarda, driving her to give up on convincing him to quit on his own and instead advised that I fire him. It is beyond shameless to focus only on what one has to gain, showing no intention whatsoever of aiding the person one has sworn to serve. Not even my own grandson deserves kindness anymore, Riarda barked. Arenfest nobles have a duty to serve the archducal family and protect the duchy. What have your parents taught you, Traugott? How were you raised to have ended up like this? This is pathetic. As much as Riarda was pushing me to fire Traugott, the decision was ultimately in my hands. Traugott, do you intend to serve me well and true? I asked, turning my eyes to the apprentice knight who was turning whiter by the word. Yes, please allow me to continue as your retainer, he cried, a desperation apparent in his eyes. Riarda's eyebrows shot up in response. Intends to resign the very moment he learns Lady Rosemind's compression method, Hartman said, narrowing his orange eyes ever so slightly with a thin smile. His frank declaration made Traugott flinch and stunned Riarda into complete silence, so she didn't even know this. But after gazing across my retainers, he continued nonetheless. He told me he has no intention to serve a bizarre girl so weak that she once collapsed from a single snowball, so frail that she falls ill at a moment's notice, and so single-minded that she burdens everyone in her quest for the library. If not for the compression method, he would have rather served Lord Wolfried. What? Be silent, Hartman. You said you would keep that a secret, Traugott shouted in disbelief, but Hartman merely laughed at him off with cold eyes. Oh, did you truly think anyone would keep such a secret without a magic contract to bind them? Remember that I am Lady Rosemind's retainer. It is my natural responsibility to tell her what she needs to know to make an informed decision. Haha, you got outed. I like Hartman. He's cool. He's awesome. Ha to you. You get it. You deserve it. You deserve to be fired. As the two boys glared at each other, Riarda bristled with sheer anger. Traugott, you are just unbelievable. This goes beyond you being an unsuitable retainer. You are rotten to the core, she shouted. I crossed my arms as I pondered the situation. I naturally understood why everyone wanted me to fire Traugott, but not what was going on in his head. For one, why was he so determined to learn my mana compression method, especially to the point that he was willing to put aside his distaste for me and, albeit half-heartedly, play the part of a loyal retainer? It was hard to imagine that firing him outright was actually the best thing to do. I would like to speak privately with Traugott. May I ask that you all clear the room, I said, presuming that he wouldn't want to speak in front of anyone else, but Riarda instantly shot me down. That is unacceptable. You must not be without guard knights when discussing the firing of a knight. What would you do if Traugott were to fly off into a rage? Consider the situation more carefully, she exclaimed. When I scanned the room, my guard knights were all nodding in agreement. But surely there are some things he would not want to say in front of others, I remarked. That is why sound-blocking magic tools exist. They will allow you to speak privately even with guard knights, Riarda said. She shook her head, making a point to note that a noble would normally fire their retainer without asking for more details, but placing sound-blocking magic tools in front of us nonetheless. I wish to hear your thoughts on this, Traugott. If you are willing to speak to me, pick up your magic tool. Traugott complied, albeit with a harsh frown. Here we go. Traugott's thoughts. Here we go. This is all going to be what he's thinking on this. And I'm assuming it's not nice. Traugott's thoughts. Why do you desire my mana compression method so much, I asked, but Traugott maintained a silent frown. I am often told to make decisions on matters only after consulting all parties involved. Thus, rather than relying entirely on the opinions of others, I am interested to hear your own thoughts on the situation. If you have nothing to say, that is fine with me also, but I will simply be forced to rely on the words of others. Traugott met my gaze. I want to learn the mana compression method because I want to get stronger, he shot back with a visible snarl, like he was annoyed at me for asking something so obvious. Everyone's eyes sharpened, despite the fact they couldn't even hear what he was saying. I'm guessing they can read lips. Maybe. That'd be good. I sighed. Traugott, if you can't even keep a straight face, Riarda will tear you to shreds no matter what I say. Traugott sucked in a gasp, exhaled, and then put on a sober expression. I did the same after all. He wasn't the only one with the rooms worth of eyes on them. My retainers were watching to see how I treated Traugott, considering I was the one he had sworn to serve. I need to ask his opinion, and that's how then based my decision on that, but... To be honest, I really did not care whether or not Traugott stayed as my retainer. I had barely spent any time with my male guard knights, and Cornelius was far more trustworthy. It was at Riarda's recommendation that I take him on in the first place, and our lack of any substantial interaction gave me no real incentive to want to protect him. I was trying to view this as objectively as possible, but as both Riarda's and Boniface's grandson, I didn't want him to be punished too harshly. I might not care about him, but that's not reasonable enough to ignore him. Oh, Mom's up too. I turned my gaze to Traugott, who looked back at me with searching eyes, maintaining an intense stare. There was a brief pause before I spoke again. Allow me to expand on my previous question. Why do you wish to become stronger? Because Cornelius and Angelica got stronger after learning your compression method, Traugott replied. In retrospect, he certainly had always seemed rather focused on them both, but why was that? I will ask again, why do you wish to become stronger? Angelica and Cornelius sought strength because they regretted having allowed me to fall into danger and wanted to become guard knights fit for my service. What drives you? And what will you do with that strength? Do you wish to serve Wilfrid, as Hartmut said? I don't think that Wilfrid would want him to be his retainer after this. So, yeah, that's off the table, probably. Wilfrid's retainers shared a tight bond, as they had continued to serve him even after he was no longer guaranteed to become the next Archduke. Considering that all new retainers were carefully vetted as a precautionary measure, it was hard to imagine Traugott would manage to secure a place in this service after leaving mine. Traugott visibly gritted his teeth. I wish to serve no one. I want to become the Knight Commander like grandfather. My grandfather, you mean Lord Bonifacius, correct? I wasn't sure why Traugott would mention Bonifacius here and not Cardstack, considering his age. It was hard to imagine he had seen Bonifacius work as the Knight Commander all that often. Perhaps he had seen him do something incredible as a kid, and now that mental image was getting more and more embellished as the years went on. Either way, I now knew that Traugott's end goal was Bonifacius. His blood was thick with the muscle-headed, strength-seeking nature of his forebears. I wanted to lead the Knight's Order like grandfather and hunt dangerous Fabies while protecting the duchy. To make that happen, I need to be stronger than anyone in Ehrenfest. You certainly would need to be strong to become a Knight Commander, I agreed casually before blinking in realization. The Knight's Orders existed to protect both Ehrenfest and the Archducal family. Thus, it was tradition for the commander to also serve as guard knights to the Archduke. Traugott, I believe it won't be possible for you to be the Knight Commander without serving anyone, since the commander serves as the Archduke's guard knight. Grandfather served no one when he was the Knight Commander. I want to be the same way. It's not going to happen. I'm pretty sure he only managed this because he's a member of the Archducal family himself. I was more than familiar with Bonifacius' exaggerated tales of the past, having listened to them during more dinners than I could count, since working out for the Dreve. If even half of those stories were true, he had led a dramatic and chaotic life, albeit not in the same way as Ferdinand. The Knight's Order was the only place that could really use his strength, and so he had served as the Knight Commander while supporting the previous generation's Archduke. It was due to the work Bonifacius did supporting the Archduke that he hadn't served as his guard knight. From what I recalled, this was also true for Ferdinand when he had served in the Knight's Order. Children of an Archduke could not become the retainer of an Archducal family member, but as Traugott was merely an archnoble, this did not apply to him. Traugott, you see, you may think it impossible for me, Lady Rosamund, but there was a time when I was actually stronger than Cornelius. Grandfather told me I've got natural talent. If I learned your compression method too, I'd still be stronger now, he declared, for his fist balled tightly. I really doubted that. He and Cornelius were of similar ages, but there was still a 2-year age gap between them, which was massive in the development of children and teens. Not to mention, Cornelius had been strong enough to serve as my apprentice guard knight even before learning my compression method. Let me take a guess here. Grandfather only told Traugott he had more talent in an attempt to cheer him up and stir up a rivalry, but Traugott took it completely seriously. Great. It was really, really hard to believe Traugott had actually been stronger at the time. My gut was telling me Cornelius had intentionally held back when they were training together. Ugh, I just want to end this conversation so I can go read the books I borrowed. My interest in Traugott was waning fast, but he seemed excited to finally have an opportunity to discuss these things. I was stronger than him, but the moment anyone learned your command and compression method, they started making way too much progress. In the end, Grandfather became so focused on training the Archducal family's guard knights that he stopped having the time to train me personally, he said, his voice dripping with vexation. I did feel a little bad that Traugott had stopped getting to spend time with his beloved grandfather, but that was life. Intruders had managed to force their way into the castle with the support of nobles from our own duchy, kidnapping Charlotte and poisoning me into a coma. Of course, retraining the knights had become a top priority. It was hard to imagine that Bonifacius, as an experienced knight commander and the oldest member of the Archducal family, would place his young grandson, who wasn't even a guard knight, over the danger bearing down on Ehrenfest. I was always the closest to Grandfather out of all his grandchildren, but at some point Angelica became his most beloved disciple, and everyone started saying Cornelius was the strongest and most honor-rich of us all. That should have been me in both places, Traugott murmured. I could tell that Bonifacius had focused so intently on training the Archducal family's guard knights that he hadn't even looked at anyone else. Grandfather already retired from the Knight's Order. It is the duty of the higher-ups to train other knights, not his. That's why I wanted to become a guard knight, Traugott shouted. His only desire was to earn Bonifacio's approval. That was why he also wasn't interested in serving Wolfried, whose future as the next Archduke was no longer certain. Why did you choose to become my guard knight, then? If you had served Charlotte, you could have trained beneath Grandfather while I was asleep. Charlotte is a girl, and so are most of her guard knights. There were only a few positions for male guard knights, and our connection was nowhere near strong enough for me to be chosen. Despite them being in the same faction, Traugott barely knew Charlotte's attendants and wet nurses. To make matters worse, since he often became overexcited when playing with Wolfried in the playroom, the adults had determined he was a poor fit for Charlotte. Meanwhile, Riarda was my head attendant and Bonifacius my grandfather. He had no choice but to aim to serve me instead, albeit against his wishes. Serving me also opened up the chance he might learn my mana compression method sooner than anyone else. Even Father went from praising me to treating me harshly since Cornelius grew stronger. I want more mana as soon as possible. I want to be stronger. Your father is Father's... your father is Karstedt's little brother, correct? I said, from what I remembered, Traugott's father was the son of Bonifacius' second wife and was married to Riarda's daughter. Traugott went to tell me how his father had constantly been compared to Karstedt while he was raised, and some of his bad blood was due to their mother's fighting. Karstedt was the son of a first wife as well as the knight commander, and while I couldn't say for sure what Traugott's father thought about that, it likely wasn't good. Despite all that, Bonifacius had seen Traugott training with Cornelius and then told him he had talent. This had made Traugott's father happier than anything. He had praised Traugott with a smile, telling him to get even stronger to earn Bonifacius' favor, which had ultimately led to our current situation. In short, Traugott wants to be stronger to earn his father's praise and Bonifacius' recognition. I understood the urge to work harder for the sake of approval, but the second I started to sympathize with Traugott, he ruined it all with a single line. Even a weak lay knight like Daniel got decently stronger with your mana compression, Lady Blower's Mind. I could blow him out of the water. Excuse me? I crossed my arms, trying to contain my anger at having such brazen disrespect. It was true that Daniel was a lay noble and that his mana capacity had once been so small that the girl he liked hadn't even seen him as a potential romantic partner, but he had worked hard to improve and dedicate himself to thinking up ways to fight more efficiently. In the end, he had become so skilled that even Bonifacius had praised him. Daniel fought using his head, unlike the apprentice knights here who charged ahead in the hopes that their mana and stamina would win the day. That's why Daniel is way more impressive than you, Traugott. I value Daniel so much that more than Traugott that they were barely even comparable. Daniel was one of my oldest associates and the guard knight I trusted most out of all my retainers. He had protected me from Stikikosa as best he could, despite knowing I was a commoner, and when he had been assigned to guard me in the temple, he had put his life on the line and fought valiantly to protect me from the Archnoble Count Bindewald. I would not forgive anyone who scorned him. Daniel made so much more progress due to his own efforts. You have an advantage that you are still an Archnoble in your growing period, but there are few who have the determination to work as hard as he did. A lay noble can only do so much before they reach their limits. They're not even worth talking about. Oh, you won't get it. Oh, really now? The moment Traugott scoffed at Daniel, he was dead to me. I had said from the beginning that I didn't want there to be conflict among my guard knights, so I was completely uninterested in someone incapable of showing others even the least amount of respect. My retainers would do well without someone like him shamelessly looking down on Daniel and Feline solely for being lay nobles. Okay, getting him to quit is the best outcome here. Firing him myself ran the risk of damaging his entire house, and I didn't want to sully Riarda and Bonifacius' name to punish their incompetent grandson. Not to mention, I didn't want them trying to get revenge or something either. I wanted him to put him in a situation where he willingly resigned. So just tell him you're not going to give him your mana compression method. I understand your position. You wish to become stronger like grandfather. You wish to earn the praise of your father. You wish to become stronger than Cornelius. And to accomplish all those things, you want my mana compression method, I said. Traugott's feelings took on a much more forceful shape than mine, but he was still a kid despite desperate for his parents' love. He wanted strength so much that he wasn't even considering his surroundings properly. I was fully aware of this, yet my affections for him were nowhere near strong enough for me to even consider helping him grow as a person. Resign from your position as my retainer at once. In return, I will teach you my mana compression method. Really? Traugott said, his expression a mix of surprise and joy. Yes, I will teach you along with the others selected at the end of winter. However, you must earn the necessary money on your own and cause no further problems. There are basic rules that everyone has to follow, regardless of status or faction, I said. Wolfried's and my retainers were naturally having to follow them as well. Traugott gave a firm nod, positively buzzing at the thought of attaining his dream. In that case, you put the sound blocking magic tool aside and announce your resignation to everyone, I said, making a point to set down my own. He followed suit, then looked around with a bright expression and made his declaration. I, Traugott, resigned from my position as Lady Rosemine's guard knight. My retainers all shot me disapproving looks, unhappy that I was allowing him to quit rather than firing him as they had wanted. My guard knights looked particularly stern, while Riarda wore the most furious look of all. Ignoring those reactions, I thoughtfully tilted my head. Riarda, what paperwork must be done to finalize his resignation? Wait just a moment, milady. A resignation would not be, she began, her voice sharp, but Hartmut caught her protest short by holding out some ink and a board. I believe he needs only write the general details of the resignation here, Lady Rosemine. I thank you ever so much, Hartmut. Now, Traugott, write here that you wish to resign from your position as my guard knight. That will put an end to all this. Traugott promptly did as he was asked. I checked what he had written as well as his signature before giving a nod. And now, Traugott, you are no longer my retainer. You are a simple apprentice knight, I said. You may return to your room now. I shall explain the rest. Of that, Traugott swiftly exited the room, no doubt eager to avoid the piercing stare he was getting from Riarda. I can understand why, as the very moment the door closed behind him, her wrath exploded. Milady, what are you thinking? You promised to teach him the mana compression method, didn't you? That's the only thing that would make him resign so easily. You are correct, I replied plainly, causing a stir among my retainers. Some questioned my decision, but none were more outraged than Riarda. Milady, being so soft on those who fail you will only displease your other retainers. Am I being soft? That seems like the perfect way to resolve everything. How? Riarda demanded. The others seemed to be equally confused. I sat up on my chair. Let me make it clear that even after telling me his side of the story, Traugott did not endear himself at all. I do not wish for him to grow, nor do I really care whether his future is a pleasant one. Then why not fire him? In that case, you should have been more harsh, and it is precisely because I care so little for him that I want him out of my hair now and forever, I said flatly, causing my retainers to blink in surprise. Hartmut in particular was now looking at me with great interest. It would have been easy for me to fire Traugott. I had a reason and the authority to do so. But such an action would simultaneously besmirch both Riarda and Lord Bonifacius. I do not care for Traugott, but I do not wish to dishonor those I do care for. If I am being soft on anyone here, it is on you, Riarda. And not just Riarda, I didn't want Cardstead to be punished for not having trained an apprentice knight well enough, as he had been during the Shikikoza incident. Firing Traugott would most likely have more repercussions than I could ever imagine, but having him resign would contain the suffering to Traugott himself. Then why did you decide to teach him the mana compression method? Cornelius asked, narrowing his dark brown eyes as he had gotten straight from Elvira at me. Were you not teaching that only to those you can trust? I made sure to look Cornelius head on as I gave my answer. What do you think will happen to Traugott now that he has quit? I doubt he can serve Wilfried, and if serving Charlotte was an option, he would have become her guard knight while I was asleep. Furthermore, once Riarda has reported this incident, he won't even be able to serve Melkor. That is true. You may have allowed him to resign despite having more than enough reason to fire him, but it makes sense that he would not be allowed to take up any similar roles. Right now, his mind isn't totally focused on the mana compression method, but the reality of the situation will strike him soon enough. His desired future is now inaccessible to him, and I imagine he will soon find just living here to be a considerable emotional burden, I explained. Hartmut stroked his chin thoughtfully and nodded. Given his behavior here, none of us will treat him as a friend. To make matters worse for him, we have been successfully consolidating the entire Amethyst student body around us over the past few weeks, including Lord Wilfried's retainers and the children of the former Veronica faction. In other words, Traugott is going to be excluded by everyone. So yeah, it's going to be worse for him here now that he has done this. It seemed this was an easy future for my retainers to imagine. Traugott would in the Royal Academy from here on out, and everyone knew it. If Ehrenbach or some other duchy were to exploit this isolation, we would run the risk of an information leak, I explained. It's even possible that in his lust for power, Traugott would resent us in some bizarre way and wish for revenge. Thus I am teaching him my mana compression method. I don't quite follow. How does that justify teaching him the mana compression method? Brunhilde asked, resting a hand on her cheek in confusion. Intention of ever teaching the method to any of my enemies, which is why the magic contract includes a clause that prevents those who sign it from trying to oppose me. Cornelius understood right away. In short, you are teaching him the compression method so that you can bind him with contract magic. Precisely. It is not that I wish to teach him the method, I simply hope to ensure he cannot exact revenge on me. Traugott having resigned meant that he would hurt only himself, and the magic contract he would eventually sign for my compression method would prevent him from lashing out at me. This was a win-win situation. Ehrenfest wanted as many nobles with high mana capacities as possible, especially ones who weren't going to rebel. And Traugott would get the compression method he wanted so much without having to endure serving as my retainer. It seems to me that this resolves all our problems, I concluded. Milady, that is no punishment for Traugott, Riarda declared, shaking her head with a severe expression, but that was precisely the point. We didn't want to drive Traugott into a corner and risk him ruining the dorm atmosphere when we were making so much progress among the uniting the factions. Traugott's dream to become the Knight Commander after growing stronger through the mana compression method will never come true, no matter how hard he works. Is that not enough? I can inflict no punishment greater than the despair he will feel when he realizes he forever closed off that future by his own hand. Traugott's punishment will not be the quickly fading sting of a swift hand, but a scar he would bear for the rest of his life. Riarda, however, wanted something more visible that others would understand as punishment. It might be better to strip him of his noble rank and send him to the temple so that he can learn his lesson, Riarda mused. Are you that mad at me, Riarda? I asked, her sudden remark almost bringing me to tears. I think you are being soft, milady, but I am not mad at you, she replied after blinking a few times in surprise. Then please do anything but send him to the temple. As the High Bishop, that's my territory. Now that I'm free of enduring Traugott as a retainer, the last thing I want is to be stuck dealing with him as a blue priest, I said, vigorously shaking my head with displeasure. Cornelius chuckled, but this was no laughing matter. Considering that Traugott looked down on Damiel for being a lay noble, I couldn't even imagine what attitude he would have toward the Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens. I would feel especially bad for those assigned to be his attendants, since they would need to put up with his inevitable temper tantrums being stuck in the temple. Not to mention, Ferdinand and I would need to train Traugott as a blue priest, and neither of us has time to waste on him. If you want to teach him a lesson, you or grandfather are welcome to do so in a way that doesn't interfere with my work. I have nothing to do with him anymore, so please do not send him my way and make him my problem again, Riarda conceded, lowering her eyes a little. Your decision may appear soft, but in reality you are cutting him off in the best way possible. Simple yet utterly brilliant, Hartman said, wearing the smile of someone who was entirely satisfied things had gone their way. That kind of annoyed me. I was not entirely fond of what he had done here either. I will take this opportunity to note something else, Hartman, I said. Yes, he said, completely unafraid. If you are going to say that providing me with information is your responsibility, then tell me what you have learned before publicizing it of your own accord. Lady Rosemine, I will not ask where you obtain your information. I recognize that being able to obtain such valuable knowledge at all is a sign of your excellent skills. However, the scholars I know report everything they learn to their superiors, and it is their superiors who decide how that information is used. How Justice entrusted everything to Ferdinand, Hartman had a tendency to use his gathered intel in ways that I didn't entirely approve of. If you say it is information you obtained for my sake, then I should decide how and when it is used and publicized, I continued. You should not say you are acting as my retainer if you only gather that which suits your needs and disclose it only when you believe the time is right. Hartman gasped in realization, abruptly stood up, and then knelt before me with his head reverently lowered. Your will is my command, he intoned. This guy is dedicated to you, girl. You picked the right guy for him, at least. And so our discussion came to an end, with me having lost one retainer and, more distressingly, most of my after-dinner reading time for that evening. Yep. That's Traugott for you. I need to continue, but at the same time... let's continue. A tea party with Eglantine. Angelica was putting her absolute all into her studies, having become almost unrecognizable as she worked toward obtaining the fourth stage of the mana compression method. Lady Rosemine's compression method is incredible, she had said to Cornelius at one point. I really respect her ability to come up with so many new things. I want to increase my capacity and raise Stenlook even better. It seemed that Angelica had found her motivation, and Cornelius was stuck helping her as she charged directly toward her goal. He had years of experience teaching her from his work in the Raise Angelica's grade squadron, plus he had studied up to 6-year texts under Daniel's guidance, specifically so that he could tutor her. He was the perfect man for the job. It helped that Cornelius had already finished his written classes, and this meant he could spend his mornings accompanying me to the library, when necessary, on top of serving as a tutor for Angelica and the other apprentice knights in the common room after breakfast and dinner. Cornelius, I imagine it must be rough teaching Angelica. How are you faring? It would be easier if not for your trips to the library. Could you by chance go there only once every 2 days, he asked with a smile. I shook my head, also wearing a smile. There are but 3 weeks before I must return to Ehrenfest, so there is no time to waste. Besides, I am certain you will manage, Cornelius. You have my faith. I suppose I knew you wouldn't be able to show such restraint, Cornelius replied with a hopeless shrug. His expression made it clear that he was well aware nothing he could say would possibly sway me. Restraint, The word gave me pause, and I put a contemplative hand against my cheek. I recall a distant memory in which I abandoned all restraint. Don't abandon restraint, Cornelius cried at once. Learn to show more, if anything. His sudden outburst reminded me of my days with Benno, which made me feel a little nostalgic. Oh, right, I need to contact Benno to inform him we're going to need a lot more Rinsham and plant paper soon. Discuss potentially selling the production method for these products. As I made the decision to tell him once I was back at Ehrenfest for the dedication ritual, Cornelius suddenly pressed his hands against my cheeks and squished my face together. Don't space out in the middle of a conversation like that. Listen to people when they speak. Please let go. I grabbed his wrist in an attempt to loosen his grip, but the strength of a knight was simply too much for me to overcome. He was going to crush my face at this rate, which was a real shame since I was blessed with such a delightfully cute one in this world. As I continued trying to escape him, the frustration in Cornelius's eyes slowly turned into amusement. You two certainly are close siblings, Lenore, and suddenly interjected with a giggle. Cornelius gasped, moved his hands away from me at once. His eyes then awkwardly fitted between the two of us. Lady Rosemary and I only began interacting like this since she came to the Royal Academy. Before then, we only lived together for the brief period of education before her baptism, he explained. I enjoy it here at the Royal Academy, specifically because it allows for such behavior, I added. The adults would have scolded us if we had done something like this back at the castle. There, we had needed to maintain the proper distance between the daughter of an archduke and her guard knight. It was only here at the Royal Academy that we had gotten closer, though we still weren't entirely like proper siblings. Lenore was peering our way with interest, so I decided to shift the topic to something a bit more romantic. Speaking of which, 6 years need an escort for their graduation ceremony, correct? I heard the girls here have a family member escort them if they have no romantic partner. But what about men? Would you escort Mother, Cornelius? I glanced over at Angelica since it was rumored she was going to be marrying one of my brothers. Meanwhile, Lenore's blue eyes sparkled with eager excitement. Cornelius blinked in surprise at the sudden change of topic, but gave an answer nonetheless. Yes, I suppose so. It would either be Mother or one of our aunts so that anyone watching would immediately know we were not romantically involved. Siblings of a similar age might seem like romantic partners to those uninvolved, which can impact marriage discussions. I see. Both boys and girls rely on their family when they have no escort. Who do you plan to escort, Cornelius? I asked. Huh? What are you saying? Cornelius floundered, shooting looks all around with clear panic on his face. Do you not yet have one, perhaps? Will one more year be enough time for you to find someone? I am told you're quite popular with the girls, so if necessary, I can ask one of them for you. It is nothing for you to worry about, Lady Rosemary. I will ask her myself, he stressed, revealing that he had someone in mind. I nodded interested, and that was when I saw Lenore lower her eyes with worry beside me. I mean, it could be you, girl. Days passed with Cornelius following me to the library despite being so busy, and eventually the date for my tea party with Eglantine was decided. The afternoon 3 days from now, Very well, I said. My retainers swiftly began making the necessary preparations, all wearing proud smiles at the fact that I had received an invitation from none other than the Greater Duchy Klausenburg. Brunhilde and Liesletta immediately checked to make sure that they didn't have any classes in the afternoon 3 days from now. It was a tea party just for girls, so Lenore and Judith were going to be serving as my guards. Angelica was too busy focusing on her studies, and watching her remain utterly focused now that she had made her choice was genuinely inspiring. Feline's light green eyes sparkled with excitement, and she rushed out the dorm saying she was going to gather information about Klausenburg. Good idea. Just be careful. Out of all my excited retainers, Brunhilde was the most excited at all, since this was an opportunity for her to put her weight behind spreading trends. Lady Rosemary, perhaps we should bring a small jar of Rinsham to give her, she suggested. I believe you promised to do so during the tea party with the music professors. True. I believe a jar with enough for a single use should do. Could you pour one for me? As you wish. Brunhilde first selected which jar to use. She then laboriously debated which of the 3 kinds of Rinsham we had would mix the best with Eglantine's usual scent. Then delicately filled the jar. I could remember that Eglantine had smelled nice, but I had exactly zero memory of the actual aroma. Should the pound cake we bring be honey-flavored again? Liesletta asked. Her question gave me pause. If Anastasius had already called her over to share the pound cake, which was likely, then she'd probably eaten honey-flavored pound cake twice by now. Surely she would find us lacking in taste if we brought the same gift every time, no? Or would it be more effective to starting a new trend if we held it up as our prize sweet and brought it every time? How did these things work in the sovereignty? I asked in return. Brunhilde joined me in thought, then she snapped her fingers in realization. Why not bring 2 pound cakes, one flavored with honey and one with apple flavor? By contrasting the one she already favors with one of a slightly different taste, it will not seem as though we are simply bringing the same thing over and over again, she said. Bringing a flavor other than the plain cake we had shared with Solange, or the rum toff we had brought to Anastasius would convey just how many varieties of pound cake there really were. Brunhilde had suggested the apple-fager pound cake for this occasion because it would go well with Eglinton's preferred teas and aromas. I could only raise my hands in defeat and nod to each suggestion Brunhilde made, since I knew nothing of what such preferences might signify. Her competence and skills continued to surprise me. It shall be done then, Leslie said with a smile upon seeing my nodding. She went into the kitchen, at which point Brunhilde looked over at Rosina, who was going to be attending the tea party as my personal musician, and had thus been present for the entire discussion as far. Rosina, have you completed the song dedicated to the goddess of light yet? I believe it will take a little while longer, my lady. The song needs to be refined as much as it is feasibly possible. If you would be so gracious as to allow me to make a suggestion, I believe it might be wise to consult Prince Anastasius once more before presenting the song to Lady Eglantine. Anastasius' demand for us to give Eglantine the song had come in the heat of the moment, but he was still the one who had instructed us to compose it. Consulting him again certainly did seem like a wise thing to do. The only problem was that we needed to decide whether to ask him to compose his own lyrics. His outpour of raw emotion could possibly have some rather embarrassing results, as there was a chance we could wish we had just written them ourselves. On the day of the tea party, I headed to Klausenberg's assigned tea party room. Each tea party room had served tables and chairs, but since only one table was being used today, the majority were stored away at the back of the room. Large screens covered with artistic illustrations closed off a little box of space for us. Ehrenfest buildings often used tapestries to decorate the walls, but kept a lot of the ivory exposed, and the furniture was mostly made of wood. Klausenberg's buildings, in contrast, had intricately embroidered cloth entirely covering the walls, a la wallpaper, on top of which hung lines of paintings that seemed to serve as a symbol of wealth. Most of the furniture appeared to be made out of marble-like stone, which made it really apparent how different the culture of each duchy was. I'm glad you came, Lady Rosamund, Eglantine said, her bright orange eyes softening into a smile as she welcomed me. Her wavy golden hair was done half up, just as before, and adorned with elaborate lace decorations that were currently in style and made as part of one's bridal duties. It seemed this trend had all started when a girl made her lace decorations to attract the boy she liked, and when their romance bore fruit, lace instantly became popular all throughout the academy. Lady Eglantine is on a whole nother level from me. She made lace as well as Tully does, and Tully is a pro. Incidentally, I was leading the creation of all of my hair ornaments and such to Tully. I had made them myself at the start, but she was so overwhelmingly better than me by this point, I didn't dare put on one of my own. I thank you ever so much for inviting me, Lady Eglantine. I would have liked to invite some of my friends and introduce you to them, but I hope to use today to engage in more thorough conversations with you, she said. Please allow me to introduce you to them at another time. Your words honor me, I replied. Despite tea parties in the Royal Academy being an important vehicle for spreading trends, I was honestly more than fine with there being fewer people here. It was more relaxing that way. Eglantine's attendant accepted the gift from Brunhilde and placed the 2 kinds of pound cake on the table. Eglantine and I drank the tea poured for us by our attendants and recommended sweets to one another. Lady Rosamund, just how many flavors of pound cake are there? These have a unique taste compared to the cake Prince Anastasius treated me to the other day. Ah, he did. Okay, Eglantine said. It seemed that Prince had dutifully shared his pound cake with her. Hopefully that had earned him some points. That was pound cake with rum toff, while this is pound cake with apple fig. Does honey pound cake remain your favorite, Lady Eglantine? I'm quite fond of the honey pound cake, but this apple fig one is lovely as well. It has a refreshing flavor that is quite pleasing to the palate. She liked the apple sage pound cake as after all. A discreet smile played on Brunhilde's lips, since she had chosen that flavor herself. I have also brought with me the rinse sham, which adds gloss to one's hair. My retainer Laisletta can give instructions on how to use it, I noted, prompting Laisletta to hold out the jar. Eglantine opened the jar before leisurely smelling its contents. The aroma is lovely, she said with a satisfied smile. She then passed the rinse sham to one of her attendants, who went off with Laisletta to learn how to use it. Eglantine watched the two leave with a gentle expression before turning to me. Lady Rosamund, I heard that you played a game of Ditter against Dunkelfelger over the library's magic tools. Prince Anastasius told me the details, she said. It seems you are won quite soundly. I am quite surprised. Anastasius was apparently using me as a regular topic in his conversation with Eglantine. Her information network truly was intimidating. She already knew everything there was to know about Schwartz and Weiss. My involvement with the magic tools can only be described as the product of a bizarre accident, and I won the game of Ditter only through the use of surprising tactics rather than the strength and skill of my knights. Under normal circumstances, Dunkelfelger would have claimed victory. Their apprentice knights were truly something to behold. Oh my, but Professor Rothman was positively gushing with praise for your fighting style. He is quite excited for the rematch. Okay, note to self. Avoid Professor Roffin at all costs. Yeah, he's going to demand that rematch at some point. Eglantine smiled as she deftly changed the topic of conversation. Your dedication whirling is quite beautiful, Lady Rosemine. I am sure it only seems seems so due to my abnormally small size. If my whirling is truly special in any way, it is only because I have seen you practice up close, Lady Eglantine. I always whirl while wishing that I might capture even a fraction of your skill and grace. I truly am glad you are not a man, Lady Rosemine. If you were to bestow upon me such praise so passionately and with heated eyes after watching me practice, my heart would surely have fallen for you, Eglantine said shyly. It seemed that people who often praised her whirling as skillful, but none before me had ever said they were considered her a source of inspiration. Should I pass this tidbit on to Prince Anastasius, or would he just get mad at me out of jealousy again? I'd say give him the tidbit. Any little bit could help. I am also told you had already finished all of your classes, Eglantine continued. I was truly surprised when my retainers consulted me about your future plans. My guardians have told me that first and second year classes are often finished early, I replied, though I doubted Ferdinand had expected me to finish them all in the first 2 weeks for the sake of accessing the library. That thought reminded me that the dedication ritual was coming up soon. I was about to be ripped away from the absolute perfection that was spending each and every day holed up in the library. I couldn't think of anything more heart-wrenching. Not to mention I need to finish my classes swiftly so I will need to return to Ehrenfest on business before the end of the term, I added. Because you are Ehrenfest's High Bishop, I presume? Precisely, the dedication ritual is being held soon. While most nobles would grimace at the mere thought of visiting the temple, Eglantine's orange eyes showed no such disgust. In fact, she seemed interested, more than interested. If a serious look on her face was anything to go by, what manner of ceremony is a dedication ritual? Is it similar to dedication whirling? There is no relation to whirling as far as I know. It is a ritual where small chalices are filled with mana, such that the duchy's land may be enriched in the spring. The size of each year's harvest greatly depends on the amount of mana provided, so the dedication ritual is a very important ceremony, I explained. I see that Ehrenfest is preserving old traditions, having the child of the Archduke serve as the High Bishop and fill the land of mana. I am moved. I blinked in surprise, having expected Eglantine to say something about Ehrenfest having so little mana that we had to resort to using one of the Archduke's children for religious ceremonies. But it was quite the opposite. She lowered her eyes for a moment before she continued. There is something I wish to discuss with you, Lady Rosemary, but could we first use these? It is a quite personal topic, and I would rather our retainers not hear. Of course, I replied. Eglantine had pulled out sound-blocking magic tools, so I smoothly placed my hand on the one set in front of me. She was wearing a small smile, but I could tell at once that it was dripping with worry. Given how she had jumped on the topic of the temple, I could safely conclude that she had invited me to this tea party with the intention to talk about temple business. What manner of work do you perform at the temple, Lady Rosemine? I was instructed by Ob Ehrenfest to help alleviate the mana shortage, and so my most important job is providing significant quantities of mana for rituals. To be honest, I am leaving the rest of my work to others at the moment, I explained. I saw no reason to be stupidly honest, and revealed that I was serving as the orphanage director, and a forewoman on top of that. Eglantine's eyes sparkled. To alleviate the mana shortage, you say? Does that mean I will also be able to enter the temple? You plan to enter the temple, Lady Eglantine? I exclaimed. Nobles scorned the temple for a reason. It had become a place to abandon children who didn't have enough mana to be useful to their house, who needed to be isolated from noble society, and whose parents couldn't afford to raise them. It was maybe somewhat strange for me to say this considering that I was a high bishop, but Eglantine was downright abnormal for wanting to join. Why do you want to enter the temple? You must know what kind of place it is. Of course, I know how nobles treat the temple, Eglantine replied, clasping her hands together in front of her chest. You know my history, do you not, Lady Rosemine? The music professors gave me a brief overview, but nothing more. I lost my entire family in a war for political power. Prince Sigiswald has asked for my hand in marriage, since she knows wedding me will get me closer to the throne, which has forced Prince Anastasius to likewise ask for my hand to forestall him. I wish to see no more battles for power and authority, yet my decision here may create another tragedy like the one that took my family. I do not want to plant the seeds of a war. I was already unaware that Eglantine had been the third prince's daughter at the time of the Civil War. According to the history lesson Ferdinand had given me, the third prince had defeated the first prince, only to then be killed by an assassin the first prince had sent out before his death. As the home of the third prince's wife, Klausenberg had furiously put its support behind the fifth prince, and when those who supported the first prince then moved to support the fourth, the Civil War had dramatically intensified. I understand well that you wish to avoid wars of succession after surviving in the midst of civil war. But does Ob Klausenberg know of your plans to enter the temple? He does, though he said it was unthinkable for a noble to enter the temple and refused my suggestion entirely. That was why she wanted to talk to me about my role as the High Bishop. It seemed she wanted something to convince him with. Unfortunately, I was not the answer she was looking for. My presence in the temple was solely to alleviate a crippling mana shortage, meaning that circumstances were completely unlike those in the Greater Duchy that had outright won the Civil War. Not to mention, the plan was for me to leave once I came of age so that I could get married, which ran in completely the opposite direction to Eglantine wanting to join the temple to avoid marriage. With how few nobles there were now, Eglantine would never be allowed to join the temple where she could be producing children with huge mana capacities. Why doesn't she just go with Prince Anastasius? She does like him, correct? Why doesn't she just go with him? She already likes him, just go with him. Just pick him. I believe it is only natural that Ob Klausenberg would refuse. I am more than familiar with how much scorn the temple receives from nobles, I said. Furthermore, you wish to join the temple to avoid marriage, correct? I am sorry to say that the powers that be planned for me to resign from my position as High Bishop to get married when I come of age. You will find nothing useful for me. I see. Here I was thinking it was an excellent idea that would allow me to contribute mana to the duchy while also avoiding another war for power. Eglantine lowered her eyes again before letting out a sigh. Is there any other position that would allow me to avoid marriage, such that I do not have to wed royalty? No. It wasn't that she wanted to join the temple in particular, she just didn't want to be the center of yet another war. In which case she was better off trying to find a solution that didn't involve the temple. Becoming the next Ob Klausenberg would allow me to avoid all this trouble, but my cousin, or rather my nephew, is already in place to take that position, Eglantine noted. She had considered marrying into another duchy, but refused a marriage proposal from royalty for such a reason would infuriate said royalty and place a massive burden on Ob Klausenberg. My adoptive father regrets adopting me, even though it was for my protection, she continued. He says that he stole away my proper position as royalty, and as he hopes for me to wed a prince and regain my original status, if only he understood that I wish for peace much more than status. Perhaps you could ask one of your family members to escort you at your graduation, I suggested. It seemed that you can hardly choose one of the princes as you are now. Indeed, Eglantine said with a sad smile, that is my intention, assuming I do not receive a direct order from the king or Ob Klausenberg. Ooh, looks like you struck out, Prince Anastasius. Lady Rosemary, please keep it a secret that I am planning to join the temple, Eglantine said. Nobody would even believe me, I replied. Even I was struggling to comprehend that one of the Klausenberg Archduke candidates wanted to join the temple. Trying to explain this to Anastasius would no doubt result in him getting mad at me for insulting her honor. With a serious portion of our discussion over, we moved on to talking about trends from Ehrenfest. What are you gonna do, girl? He's gonna want details. He's gonna want to know why she's not asking him to escort her, and he's gonna demand it from you. What are you gonna do? You can't tell anybody. You had to keep it a secret. Oh dear. This is not good. With a serious portion of our Eglantine was quite curious about Rinsham and my hairpins on top of music, and she seemed interested in importing them to Klausenberg. I will report this to Ob Ehrenfest upon my return for the dedication ritual. Would you like me to stealthily bring back some Rinsham for you, though it might be a product with a cost? Oh my, were Prince Anastasius to hear that, he would get jealous again, Eglantine said with an amused smile. She placed her finger over her lips. Please do. One discreet jar, as a secret between us. May our friendship be long and prosperous, Lady Rosamond. Yay! You got a friend from a greater duchy! Woo! Oh, no! Oh, no! Oh, no, oh, no, oh, no. Now I get what the dang description meant. Because I read the description of what this book entailed, and it was talking about some kind of political thing that would be bad, essentially. And I was thinking, oh, no, this has got to be it. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.